What is the worst instance of that sinking feeling you've ever had? Got my coat stolen on the underground in London. Wasn't a good coat. Wasn't too upset about it. Got to Heathrow, my destination. Was on my way to Canada. Walked up to the check-in desk. Can I see your passport? Pause. Shit. I was so stressed out I started dry heaving. I missed a call from my very pregnant friend a few years ago. I'd been at her house a couple of days before to help her fiance move a dresser and hang out and get some little things done for the baby. She was due in about a week, so she was limited in what she could pick up or move. Anyway, I'd slept through her call the night before and, for some reason, had this incredible feeling of dread when I saw it the next morning on my call log. I called her back. Hey, everything okay? Everything is not okay. There was a pause as she tried to find the words to tell me what was happening. Everything was still for a heartbeat. Then too calmly, she said that her fiance had come home from work with a headache and she had told him to go lay down. She checked on him once and his breathing was weird, but not alarming. She checked on him a second time and he was seizing. Something had ruptured in his brain, and she called 911, who rushed him to the hospital. It was too late. He wasn't going to wake up. His parents took him off of life support later that day. My friend gave birth to their daughter a couple of days later. They were both at his funeral that weekend. It was the most crappy, heartbreaking thing I'd ever watched someone I love go through until my own dad died a couple of years later. A girl I know was watching her husband train a horse when the horse kicked him in the head and chest and killed him. She saw it happen and their daughter saw it happen also. The next day she delivered their second child. It was the saddest thing I've ever heard. Blew away an entire production database instead of the dev database. The day before we set up proper backups, there was nothing left. We had to tell everyone to re-enter their work. A true racer-generating event there. Having to drive my mom to the hospital after we had just learned that my grandfather's house had caught fire. The sinking feeling came from when we were in the waiting area and they delivered the news that he didn't make it. Never heard my mom make that type of sound and hope to never hear anything close to it ever again. When I was driving into a parking lot and put my foot on the brakes to stop, and my foot went straight to the floor, busted a pipe in the brake system, and suddenly couldn't stop the car. I felt like my seat went out underneath me. Must have been an old car to straight up Fred Flintstone it. My mom called one evening out of nothing, said she had to tell me something and she would only tell me in person so she would take a plane the next morning. She lives at the other end of the country. I spent that night awake wondering which terrible disease she had and how much time she had left. Turned out it was just some trivial relationship bulls, breaking up with her BF etc. I was mad. That realization that the doctor was talking to me in a hushed tone and with a pitted expression. Then came the C word. Not the fun one. Nothing like going to your GP after work for mild shortness of breath and then finding out a couple hours later your chest is filled with fluid and several masses. No worries though. I had the opposite of the sinking feeling when I found out it's a good cancer and I'm totally gonna beat it and go on to live a normal life. Hiding from a girlfriend's father. She hid me in a pile of goddamn laundry. The sinking feeling was when the clothes were being taken off the pile, one by one. Good lord, I have hidden there too, but didn't get caught. It would have been a weird experience to be caught naked at 2 AM with a boner and condom still on. A few days ago when my husband told me he loves another woman and isn't sure he wants to be married, even worse is how out of the blue it all is. That feeling is still so strong. Hoping to go numb any day now. I have been there, hurt for about 6 months but in the end it was worth it. Found someone a few years later and we've been together 15 years now. When I realized my paycheck will cover my bills for the next 2 weeks, but literally nothing else. No gas or food for me. And I thought living off $40 for the next 2 weeks was going to bad. When I flipped off the bee who turned in the intersection before it was her right of way, caught up to her and motioned WTF just to realize it was my boss. 3 days ago I was told my stepfather was missing and presumed dead. That sinking feeling can last for days as it turns out. When I heard my mom scream in the middle of the night, only to come downstairs and see police in my front entrance at 1 AM. My twin has not come home yet from being out with friends. He died at 11 p.m. in a car accident. I am so sorry. The first time I saw my brother's body inside the casket, I can still remember seeing my family crying, and as I approached the casket with my cousin holding my hand, seeing him laying there, the feeling was just intense. I'm sorry for your loss. Got a phone call from my cousin, who was crying hysterically. The sinking feeling didn't happen until she asked, "Have you talked to brother or stepmom?" That's when I knew it was my dad. I know this feeling. My dad called me crying. My mom had been sick for a long time, so I always knew in my heart that this call would come, but it still doesn't make that sinking feeling less painful. She died a week after that phone call. I'm sorry for your loss. When I realized the girl I was seeing had gone upstairs with another guy during a party we went to together, I told my wife that if she wanted to end our marriage, then she could pack her crap and walk out the freaking door. She did. As the door closed and I was left there alone in a dark room, surrounded by the life we had built together, I felt like I was slowly melting into the carpet. Vertigo and blurred vision set in. I was hyperventilating and I need to hold the wall to walk. I collapsed and almost passed out. It was one of the worst moments in my life. Going in for my first ultrasound on my first pregnancy on the 1st of July and seeing the doctor pause and my husband having a confused look on his face after I asked, "So do you see the baby should have been 11 weeks. I had miscarried at 6 weeks without knowing or having any signs. Just the silence and confused faces. I couldn't see the screen. Made my blood drain and I felt instantly sick. And my head was spinning in all a matter of seconds. I literally went from cloud 9 and excitement to complete, utter despair in about 10 seconds. Taking a dump in a girlfriend's house, watching the water rise, and rise, and rise, knowing there's nothing to do but pray that it stops. Thankfully the pressure of a few gallons of water unclogged the behemoth. I dropped just in time. As water rises, feeling sink. Being told my nan died, but then being told 5 seconds later she was murdered. Holy heck. I'm sorry man. That's really rough. August, the start of my senior year of college. I get a call from my girlfriend's mother, and she's crying and crying. My heart starts pounding, and my body freezes up. She manages after a few seconds to say that her husband is dead. My entire world collapsed inward. It felt like the whole room was sucked into me. My 2 roommates ran to me as I started crying. She told me that she can't find my girlfriend, so she doesn't know yet, and that I should be here when she tells her. I lived 2 hours away from my girlfriend and her family. I could barely get a coherent thought in my brain, and my world just got darker and more narrow every minute I drove there. When she finally got home from classes, nearly everyone in her family was there waiting for her, waiting to tell her the news. Seeing her walk through the doors was just unbearable. She had loved her dad, and the death was incredibly, impossibly sudden, and so my girlfriend's world collapsed, too. Sometimes there's nothing worse than that sinking feeling, except seeing someone else experience it. Middle of the night waiting for my almost wife to get home from a night out with the girls. She's a bit late, but I'm not too worried yet. We lived at the top of a big hill that was almost a small mountain with a mile-long windy road through the forest all the way up. I went outside to have a smoke and listen for her car. You could hear any car approaching long before it got there. It was super pitch black dark that night and still and quiet. As I was straining my ears to listen, I started to hear what took me a while to figure out was footsteps coming from far down the drive. "Hello," I call out into the dark. "Help," she says. Holy frick, it's her. She had crashed into a tree about half mile down the road. I can't see her because it's so dark. She starts running towards me. I crashed. I'm hurt. Don't look at my face, it's all fricked up. I've never again sank as low as I did at that moment. OMG, more details please. My cat was 18 months old and we could hear a sort of muffled but quite desperate meowing. I searched around the house in all her usual hiding spots and didn't see her, so sat back down to watch TV. I heard the meow again, even more desperate this time, so I looked everywhere. Then I went into the kitchen and saw her black tail going round and round in the washing machine that was on and in full cycle. It was the worst feeling ever. She was rushed to the vet who said it was unlikely she'd make it. I cried and cried all night waiting for the phone call in the morning from the vet. She is now 16 and still going strong. When I was in 3rd grade I put a baseball bat through my dad's brand new big screen TV. This was back when big screen TVs just came out and they were the new big thing. And after getting over some financial issues, it was the first big purchase my dad made when we're back in a stable financial position. My dad is a great, loving, caring father who would never hit me or my siblings, but that day he lifted me up by the throat and pinned me against the wall. I will never forget the look of pure rage in his eyes. 4 days ago, I picked up my boyfriend's cell phone to check something online. Found a bunch of texts from an ex. His replies: "I miss you. I'm going to come visit you at work. The way things ended between us wasn't right. You were the best girlfriend I ever had. The last one ripped my heart in half. He's had a really terrible year, and I've been with him every step of the way. Took him into my home, and never asked him to repay me for anything. I confront him in tears, shaking so hard I can barely muster words. He tells me it's all my fault, because he was bored, and we'd had a disagreement prior, which led him to texting her in the first place. Been crying at night with glasses of wine ever since. It's not your fault. Don't let him tell you it is." I was about to lay down for a nap and I saw my phone ring. I rolled over and didn't answer it. I decided I should at least see who called, and it was my dad. He texted me right after saying that I needed to come home because my grandma wasn't going to make it. This past Wednesday was one of the worst days of my life. I got home from work and received a cryptic text from my mom asking if I'd heard what happened on Monday. It turns out my cousin, who I'm really close with and had just eaten dinner with earlier that night, relapsed and overdosed, and nobody bothered to tell me until 2 days later. He survived, but barely. He had been clean for months and really was getting his life back together. But for some reason he decided to get fricked up Monday night just hours after we'd had an awesome dinner together. Later, while talking to my mom about the whole situation, it came out that my parents are openly contemplating a divorce. Frick me, right? I don't think they'll go through with it, but just the fact that it's out there made me pretty upset. So at this point I'm really angry and drinking a huge beer while browsing Facebook trying to get myself together. And then I found out a high school buddy of mine had died that day. Worst day ever. I'm so sorry to hear that, man. Each of those things are terrible to deal with on their own right, but all together is a crap storm. Try to stay strong, bud. I went in for a job interview with a company I really wanted to work for. Things had been going pretty well for me. Just got my first car, 2009 Mini Clubman S, and drove it out feeling on top of the world. I get in the interview and things are going well. They seem to like me. I was being interviewed by the CEO and the CFO of the company. Small company, so I was slightly intimidated but answered everything. Then I hear a boom outside, and then another. Takes me a minute to realize it's thunder, and I realize the weatherman had said something about scattered showers. It starts pouring outside, hard enough we can hear it in the conference room. I left my sunroof open. I was not even halfway through the interview, and knew if I asked for them to give me a minute while I run out to close the sunroof I'd risk losing the job. The reason I say it's the worst time I've had that feeling is because this was happening while the CEO of the company is staring at me asking questions. I'm sitting there with about 50% of my brain thinking about the interior of the car I got signed into my name less than 24 hours before getting ruined. I somehow managed to not show how distracted I was, and completed the interview, thanked them, and walked out as if I was in no hurry, then ran through the parking lot. The interior of my car wasn't happy with me, but hey, here I am sitting in my office at the job I wanted. TLDR. Sunroof open during storm. Couldn't leave interview to close it. I guess they made a bad decision. Get back to work. Walking carpet 23. When I overheard he's dead on the phone call my mother was having with my grandma. My granddad had had a heart attack earlier that morning outside our next door neighbor's house. Waking up to a call at 5 in the morning from my friend. See that I already have 20 some odd missed calls from her. Answer the phone to hysterical sobbing. I'll never forget the way she said James is dead. James was one of my closest friends in high school. I felt like I got the wind knocked out of me, but the wind didn't come for another half hour. When my wife moved in with her boyfriend and took my daughter with some guy she had met online. Then she told me I can't see my daughter unless a court says I can. She refuses to tell me where she is and now I have to wait to make the money to afford a lawyer so I can do something about it. My mother-in-law says my wife is crazy and wouldn't feed my daughter when she stayed with her. It's the worst wait in my life. Pulled into the driveway behind my mum's car, applied the handbrake, got out and locked the car door. Then I hear a loud click and my car starts rolling forwards as the driveway is slanted. And in that moment I realize the handbrake had disengaged because I hadn't applied it properly and my car is rolling towards my mum's. Frick. In a panic I tried to do my He-Man impression and grab the door handle to stop it rolling forward. Yeah, like that's going to help. It just ended up hurting my wrist. Luckily the damage was minimal. But she's just got a brand new car so I triple check I've applied the handbrake properly every time now. Frick buddy texted me that she was pregnant. She comes from a religious Catholic Hispanic family who don't like abortions, or premarital sex, or gringos fricking their daughter. Getting a panicked call from my wife while I was at work that an ambulance had just taken my 3-month-old daughter to the hospital and she was not breathing. I worked an hour from the hospital where they took her and every bad scenario entered my mind in that hour drive. By the time I got there I just knew that I would never see her smile again. Well, to make a long story short, they got her intubated and kept her alive for 8 days before we were able to get all the testing done that basically confirmed our worst fears that she was brain dead. We pulled her off everything on the 8th day and held her for over 3 hours before she passed. Worst f***ing day of my life. I can look at pictures of her now and visit her grave, but there is a video I took of her where she is giggling at me continuously for about a minute straight. I tried watching it once and couldn't make it 20 seconds before sobbing uncontrollably. I still can't watch it and it's been just over 3 months since she's passed. Sorry for the sob story. When I was a kid, one morning we discovered my older brother missing. We were all looking for him and my younger brother said he could see his lower body and feet in the tree out in our backyard. Well, I run out there to get him only to discover that his feet are hanging out of the tree. I stopped dead in my tracks as my stomach bottomed out. He had hung himself the night before. So I turned around and ran for my parents. That must have been traumatic. You poor guys. 1 year ago yesterday I was at the bank refinancing my car on my lunch break and got an email from the head of HR. Are you in today? We need to talk this afternoon. I knew the guy in that email was way too professional sounding, so I knew something was up. Finished up at the bank, went back to work, was told that due to a giant reorg, I had 48 hours to either accept a relocation offer halfway across the country, or a severance package. Told him I'll take the severance. Peaced the heck out, went home and polished up the old resume. Managed to land the job and never missed a day of employment. All that sucks. Best is when you get the severance and a new job, but with a nice vacation in between. I was on a smoke break on the USS Cole on the aft of the ship. Seeing that boat come at us, I knew in my gut something crappy was about to happen. What really gets me, though, is I was about to go have lunch but for whatever reason, decided to bum a cig from my rackmate, even though I didn't even smoke. And freaking row, though, if the watch had fired on them, then they probably would have been court-martialed for killing some innocent fathers or some crap. Something of note for extra weirdness, my father did the same freaking thing when he was on the USS Stark. Went for a cig he bummed from his rackmate before going to his watch, which was where the second one hit. When my kid gets old enough, it'll let him know that if he is on a ship and has a desire to smoke a cig, to immediately call battle stations. My wife and I were having difficulties and she was staying with a friend for a while. I kept telling myself we could fix it, that I could improve and it would all be okay. Then, I was looking for a PDF on her hard drive that was in a folder that wasn't shared over the network. Noticed she left Facebook open. Watched her infidelity unfold in real time. I just sat and watched the messages back and forth. Then I punched a hole in the wall. Divorce should be final in a few months, but maybe it was for the better. It turned my useless sorrow and self-pity into rage. Rage, at least, is useful. My friends and I were doing something we shouldn't have been doing. Bottle rocket wars. We were 9 or so at the time around 4th of July. Of course, Even though we were wearing safety glasses, one hits my friend right above the eye. He freaks out. I tell him, dude, don't tell your mom. But he was worried he'd go blind. So I caved and we went to his house and he told his mom. I stood outside awkwardly as he got in big trouble. Then his mom called my mom. I sat in my room. My mom came in and said, you knew this was wrong. We told you not to do this, and you did it anyways. Your dad is going to have a talk with you when he gets home. Now this is like 2 p.m. My dad gets home at 5:30. I literally sat, staring at the clock, for over 3 hours. My gut turned over probably about 10,000 times waiting for my dad to walk in the door. I heard him get home, and then it got worse. After 10 minutes he walked in, talked with me, etc. etc. But those 3.5 hours were the longest, sinking feeling hours I've ever had. TLDR. I got in a bottle rocket fight. Waiting 3 hours for dad to come home to punish me was worst feeling ever. We were on a family vacation with my cousins and for whatever reason, our parents thought it would be okay for us kids to go down to the pool by ourselves. The 2 older cousins went down the little water slide at the deep end and seemed to be having a grand old time. They were like, I'm Rodney, why don't you try it? I was like, sure, what do I have to lose? Well, if I'd taken a moment to assess the situation, I would have surely remembered that I did not know how to swim. And so shortly after that, I experienced the worst sinking feeling I've experienced. Thankfully a portly middle-aged lady grabbed me out of the pool. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.